and welcome to another edition of Today with Dr. Wendy. I'm Wendy Patrick. My co host Larry Dersham and I have a great show for you tonight and a wonderful guest for the second half. We have Judge Ken Starr joining us for the second half, getting ready to discuss his new book, Religious Liberty, and a little bit of personal information that we have queued up to ask him about. So stay tuned for that. But first, we have officially entered springtime, and what a wonderful season it is. We've been enjoying the warmer weather, the outdoors, a little bit of the Easter break, and springtime is often thought of a chance for renewal and rebirth, but it's also a chance for birth. And that brings us to our first topic of having children. Now, maybe it's a coincidence that there are many babies that are born in spring. Obviously, there are kids born every day all over the world. But springtime is actually what we're going to talk about in terms of the relative cost of having children. Because let's face it, kids are expensive. But a new law in Utah is recognizing that they are very expensive before they're even born. Now, one of the most important questions that married couples have is, when do we have kids? What is going to be the timing? I mean, whose job gives the best maternity leave, paternity leave? Who lives near their parents or can have parents come and visit? They can help out with childcare, with babysitting while mom and dad are both at work. Well, in Utah, they thought this through a little more carefully with respect to couples that are not married and are not necessarily either in a relationship, because the questions are very different for couples that conceive a child who are not together. The answers are very different, by the way, as well, which is why Utah came up with a law that requires new fathers, if they're not in the relationship with the mothers, to be liable for up to half of the pregnant mother's expenses pre-birth. Now, that, of course, would include medical expenses, cost of delivery. I mean, there are so many things that go into being pregnant that we don't really talk a lot about. And very few states have actually legalized this type of care. And we really haven't talked about it until just lately. So this new law in Utah will require biological fathers to pay half of the medical expenses for any pregnancy and birth. And this really kind of has stirred the debate about what are different states' maternal health care policies. So now, Larry, I know we've talked about this, and really the genesis here is to foster a culture of life and a culture of quality of life. No new mother should have to shoulder the bill and choose between health and wealth. She should get both. But what kind of ramifications will a law like this have? And can we expect to see something like this in California?
I think that the law might have the effect of making men more careful about entering into casual romantic relationships and make them more responsible in their behavior by financially empowering women in crisis pregnancies. And it's kind of interesting. This could apply to it's in Utah, but it could apply to California too. It might spread all over the United States. And some people are saying that Utah's new law could be part of a winning new strategy for the pro-life people,
Yeah,
as far as making people think twice.
yeah, it's interesting you say that because a lot of people have talked about that in Utah and other places. I mean, this has really just caught fire. Everyone's talking about it in all 50 states, but they've been talking about the fact that this law wasn't necessarily meant to be anti-abortion, although that's what many people hope is the result. But it really is just pro responsibility and making sure that women have access to the best health care while they are pregnant. However, I do have to say, as a practical reality, that's all a new mom wants to think about, right? Suing the father. I mean, that's not the way many women want to begin a co-parenting relationship, is through a lawsuit. Not to mention the costs that are sometimes associated with hiring a lawyer, although there certainly are clinics and people that are lining up to handle some of these cases on a pro bono basis because it's the right thing to do. Many new moms still don't want to be running back and forth to court. They would much rather these options be available willingly and earlier. And I will also mention, though, by the way, this law does not take effect until paternity is established. This is by no means meant to have fathers paying for kids that are not theirs.
And would it work out with you'd have to bring the person to court to enforce this? Is that how it
Well,
probably
that
work
is the
out?
problem with many of these kinds of laws that do require a judicial ruling, which means that couples have to go to court. And I'll use that term couple lightly because, like you pointed out, it's talking about paternity. It's not necessarily requiring that a couple be in a relationship. So you are correct that the reason that it's generated some buzz, the talk of this new law, is precisely that people really should think through entering into this kind of relationship or having unprotected sex where you'd be having this conversation to begin with about the
Sure.
costs of pregnancy. So it's not surprising that this law has been talked about as much as it has. And by the way, there are several other states that already did have laws like this. But the fact that we're really discussing it and other states are watching, they're probably going to be seeing how many women actually avail themselves of this law. Because simply by putting a law on the books doesn't necessarily mean that the Utah courts are going to be clogged with lawsuits by new mothers seeking to establish half of the pre-birth costs from the biological fathers.
That is really fascinating too. Yeah, I wanted this is kind of jumping to a different topic, bring out a quote, kind of a silver lining quote. Uh, if do we want to discuss anything else on this law, Wendy?
No, Larry, I think I'll give you a
Okay.
better segue. So, springtime is a time for birth and rebirth, and it's also a time to revisit really the genesis of this show, which is headlines with the silver lining. And on that note, Larry, I understand you have a couple of good stories. Maybe you can narrow down one or two for us in this first half before we have our esteemed guest join us.
Right. Well, the good quote is this is from a gentleman by the name of Owen Woodward, and it's more powerful than the will to win is the courage to begin. Now, you think that would be a brand new quote out of maybe the last decade or something, but this goes way back in the first and second centuries. There was a Greek Stoic philosopher, and his name was Epictetus. Epictetus, I think I'm pronouncing that right. And he said, first say to yourself, what would you be? And then do what you have to do. And basically, in a way, he's saying, figure out what you want to do with your life and then do it. And just take those steps to realize what you want to be and so forth. But I
That's
wanted
sort
to
of what
talk,
we hope our kids do when they're in high school and sometimes even younger nowadays, isn't it? Is
it
sort
is,
of brainstorm in this day and age. You know, Larry, I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, I was never required to write down what I wanted to do for a living. But yet that's what we ask our kids. They're 8 years old and we say, what do you want to be?
I know, and
And they
some
all
of them
say
know.
firefighters or whatever, right? They should probably say, I don't know, can you please ask me once I have completed all my general education requirements and my college degree? And then maybe they'll have it figured out. But anyway, I
Right.
digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, and anyway, I wanted to get into some a little bit of a heavy topic here, and this one is kind of like my opinion piece, so it doesn't reflect the opinions of the station nor my wonderful co-host Wendy Patrick. In fact, she probably doesn't even know what I'm going to talk about yet, but briefly, uh, uh, I'm talking about what's changing in our society, and I just want people to realize that under socialism slash communism, there's no middle class. You basically have the ruling class of planners and you have the working class of serfs, the people that do all the work. And that's basically it. And I think what we may be seeing, and this is my opinion only, that some of our elites seem to be cloaking their consolidation of power by bringing up such things as saving the planet or eliminating racism. But in my opinion, that could be kind of a moral masquerade as they're flying around in their jet planes preaching to the rest of us. And people should look this name up. There's a gentleman by the name of Klaus Schwab, and that's with a K, Klaus, Schwab, Schwab. He's the current head of the World Economic Forum, and he's a heavy roller. He's got a lot of money, got a lot of power. And he's promoting this so-called Great Reset. And he says, and you can look this up, the Great Reset, under the Great Reset, no one will own anything and they will be happier for it. And so it's the elimination of private property. And I just had this observation too. Could we be going through what's called a bloodless coup? And basically, we got the Capitol surrounded by barbed wire, razor wire fence. We've lost control totally of our southern border, and we're getting executive orders left and right. And what's interesting, could there be a shadow government running things? Because I'm not totally convinced that our dear president is writing all these executive orders or possibly has even read them. And that's my opinion. But anyhow, just something to think about, because we are under we are going through a change for sure. And it was Obama who promised this back in a speech in Missouri on October 30th, 2008, that we are on the cusp of a historic presidential, of fundamentally transforming the United States of America. So what did he mean by that? That's a pretty heavy statement for somebody who became president and was president for 8 years. So it's just something for us to think about.
And I'm glad you got all that out, Larry, because as we like to say, we are the cloud and the silver lining here on Today with Dr. Wendy. And let me pull us out of the hole. I think those are great observations, and I think that they need to be said, and I think you need to make them. But getting back to the theme of springtime and renewal, one of the other things that I'll say has been the silver lining of much of what you've mentioned is there are both Democrats and Republicans on both sides of this debate actually finding that there are so many different things they want to work together on. I mean, many Democrats, they work hard for their money too. So at the very least, there is always so much that unites us that we continue to work forward with. So that I suppose is a silver lining as we learn more about, especially as we come out of the pandemic business-wise. But anyway, folks, don't touch that dial. We're going to take a very short commercial break. But when we return, you are going to meet one of the most famous attorneys and judges in the country who has just come out with a great new book you are all going to want to read. We will be back in a flash. Welcome back to Today with Dr. Wendy. I'm Wendy Patrick. You've seen him on TV, you've read about him in the news, because not only of the famous cases he's worked on, but the great causes that he undertakes. He's on Fox News and numerous talk shows because of his amazing in-depth knowledge of all things legal. Larry, who do we have with us today?
Yes, Wendy. Ken Starr has had a distinguished career in academia, the law, and public service. Currently, he's of counsel at Lanier Law Firm, and he served the president and chancellor of Baylor University and dean of the Pepperdine School of Law. He's argued 36 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, including during his service there as U.S. Solicitor General. He served in the United States Circuit Court for the District of Columbia. And he's got such a distinguished career, as I mentioned. He was appointed to serve as independent counsel for 5 investigations. It's probably best known for the independent counsel work he did between 1994 and 1999 when he headed up the Whitewater investigation that led to the impeachment of US President Bill Clinton, and also for serving as President Trump's defense team on that team during his first impeachment. And so he's written a number of books, First Among Equals, the Supreme Court in American Life, also one called Contempt, a memoir of the Clinton investigation. And now he's got a brand new book out. It's called Religious Liberty in Crisis, Exercising Your Faith in the Age of Uncertainty. Welcome to the program, Ken.
So, Ken, let me just ask a very endearing personal question that we have here. You've done so much personally, professionally, I mean, just all on the public stage, and we could spend the whole rest of the day just talking about all the great things you've done. But I found it just fascinating and very, very endearing and special that you actually sold Bibles door to door to earn money for college. So here you actually have a background, like so many of our listeners, that led to really where you are today. And one of my other favorite little tidbits about you that I don't know if our listeners remember, although I assume most of them do, is that you actually shared the title of Time Magazine's Man of the Year Award in 1998 with none other than Bill Clinton, whose impeachment trial you, of course, led as independent counsel. So I always like to say each of you earned that distinction for, shall we say, different reasons. But we have you here tonight to talk about your new book, and we would love to turn it over and hear a little bit about what inspired you to write this latest book, Ken.
Yeah, in the book, Ken, you spend the last chapter is called Cancel Culture. So, how can we, as Friends of Liberty, fight back? And how can Americans protect their rights of religious freedom and take a more active role in advancing the cause of liberty? Yes.
Right. Oh,
Sure.
yes, please. Mm.
It is. Very good. Hey, Ken, just this week, I think it was that it's reported that Biden has put together a commission to look into the Supreme Court. And some of us are worried about that concept of court packing, which I guess FDR tried back in the late 1930s. Is there a danger of them putting on just a number of justices that would just support all the leftist causes?
I said the same thing, so now I know that I'm in good company, Ken. Thank you for validating that thought.
I hope you're right.
Right. Yeah, one of the reasons that I think many of us agree with you that it's not ever going to happen. I mean, it's been over a century that it's been at the number that it is. It's true. Ex-President Trump actually appointed 1/3 of the currently constituted Supreme Court. It's funny to think of it that way, but absolutely. I mean, the Democrats aren't going to be in power forever, and then of course, if we have court packing, how many are we going to have? 30? I mean, as you know, you were a judge. I mean, it's hard enough when you have just a few people around the table to be able to make some of these decisions. But we're nearing the end of the show, and if people want to find out more about all the great work you're doing, I know you've got a huge Wikipedia page that goes on forever. But is there a more focused place that we could draw our listeners and our viewers' attention if they want to learn more about you and your books? Imagine that. If you Yes. I can't. You've argued all those cases in front of the Supreme Court. I'm sure those naughty comments don't faze you one bit. But thank you so much for joining the show today. We greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you,
And
Ken.
and thank you so much to
Thank
our
you, Ken.
listeners. Thank you so much to our listeners. Boy, you had a great show tonight. We were so privileged to have Judge Starr joining us. We want to wish you a wonderful, safe rest of your weekend. Please join us next week for more of Today with Dr. Wendy, Headlines with a Silver Lining. Have a great week and God bless you.